One reason we respect the people we respect is because of how they respond in times of adversity. We see them walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We see them hurt without hurting. And when we watch them respond in their time of adversity, those are lessons that we want to learn. We don't want to forget those lessons. Someone once said, pain without gain is shame. And we don't want the gain without having learned the lessons, and keep the perspective that people who respond well at adversity leave us with. We need that perspective. But helpful to have that perspective is to engage our power to choose. Our power to choose is what will strengthen us for whatever it is that comes, and will enable us to overcome evil intent and evil people and thwart evil, and will help us not become like them. In fact, our will to choose is the very power that we have, that God has given us, and our response that goes with our will to choose, our responsibility, that will enable us to control and dictate our future. But a lack of responsibility, a lack of responsibility, will then make us a slave to the very thing we hate and the people that we reject. So when we talk about a responsibility, we want a real responsibility, a fact-based responsibility. A fact-based responsibility that will give us the willpower, whatever it is that we encounter. However, that responsibility is not natural. It's unusual, and it's unexpected, and it's unnatural. And it is not always the positive that we would think of. But this is our life. These are our times. These are our circumstances. We did not choose this pandemic. This pandemic chose us. And it would be a shame to go through the lessons that we've learned as we walk through these times of adversity and forget those lessons, or to lose our perspective. Joseph lived for 25 years and did not even know there was a story, much less the end of the story. But what Joseph teaches us is, how would we respond if we, like Joseph, how would we respond with confidence if we knew, like Joseph, God was with us? Not how would we react. How would we respond if we, like Joseph, were confident God was with us? You see, our circumstances are a chapter. They're not the story. At any given time in the life of Joseph, he makes seemingly disconnected responsibility choices that by themselves, standing alone, seem to represent nothing, because the circumstance is just a chapter. But when you put them all together, they form the story. So we want to look at Joseph's responsibility. When we think about that, all the people we have in Hebrews chapter 11 are people who exercise their power to choose. They all responded out of a determined and reasoned choice. We might say a measured judgment. They all had a measured judgment. At the core of who we are is a man who allowed himself to be taken to be sold, to be put on a cross, who did not resist for our good. Never underestimate the power of a reasoned and determined choice. However, pause. As we go through this story, it is so familiar to us. Please don't jump ahead of me. Please, as much as you can, track with me. Because in Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20, we find the hero appears. It says, "But as for you, you meant it evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people." God meant it for good. How did God mean it for good? Because He took the choice, the power of a reasoned and determined choice of how this young man responded in his time of adversity and saved many people. Again, the choices that he makes, how he responds in any one of those given choices, those opportunities, seems that it can be standalone. But when you put them all together, we see the power of a measured response. However, there's a backstory to this. In about 2000 BC, approximately so, God decided He would start all over again. And there was a man by the name of Abram that He called. And He made a promise to Abram and said to him, "Through you, many nations shall be blessed through your seed." But that depended on a seed. That same promise is made to Isaac. That same promise is made to Jacob. And Jacob has 12 sons. And that one promise hinges on one of those 12 sons of Jacob, Joseph. Joseph is his favorite son from his favorite wife. And because he is his father's favorite son, his brothers are envious and they despise him. On occasion, Jacob would send Joseph to see how the brothers were doing in their shepherding. And not all the time does Joseph bring back a favorable response to his dad about how the brothers are doing. On this occasion, however, Jacob sends Joseph. He comes to the spot where he thinks his brothers would be, and they're not there. He asked the man, "Do you know where my brothers are?" They said, "Well, about 17 miles on down the road at Dothan, you're going to find your brothers there." And they see him coming. When they see him coming, they begin to discuss among themselves, "Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him." No, on second thought, let's put him in a pit, and then we'll decide what we're going to do. Joseph comes. They take him, they strip him, and they put him in a pit. And while they're deciding what they're going to do, a band of traders come by. And the brothers decide, this is what we will do. We will sell him into slavery. This is Joseph, Jacob's son, now sold into slavery. The brothers set in course circumstances that would make many victims the aggressor. But this time, the innocent does not take on the characteristic of the guilty, not this time. He is sold into slavery. There comes a problem for us. If God is with Joseph, then how can a good God allow this young man to be treated with such hatred by his brothers and sold into slavery. If God is with him, and that's the kind of God he has, what kind of God is he serving? Well, Christians don't believe that. Because if we believe in a God that doesn't allow suffering from good people, then congratulations. You've quit believing in a God that doesn't exist. Because that's not the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible allows good people to suffer as well. So what we see is we're going to see in Joseph the power of a reasoned and determined response. But now, Joseph is in slavery. In chapter 39 and verse 1, it says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. Now, like us, Joseph has the power to choose. He has the power to respond. How would I respond in that kind of circumstance if I was confident God was with me? You see, it was good not to be a slave in this time, but to be born rich and then become poor was even worse. And now Joseph has lost it all. And this is the kind of God, you just need to get you another God. But unlike us, Joseph doesn't have the Bible. Joseph doesn't have the rest of the story. All he has are the stories that his father has told him about his grandfather and his great-grandfather. And so Joseph acts with confidence that God is with him. How would you respond if you were in that circumstance and you were confident God were with you? Not how would you react, how would you respond? Well, in chapter 39 and verse 4, things begin to get a little bit worse for Joseph. Joseph found favor in his sight, that is Potiphar's sight, and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had put him under his authority. Here's now Joseph, a slave in the house of Potiphar. All that Potiphar has is in his house. And so then it goes on to say, so it was from that time that he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and the field. Doesn't that seem unfair? Why not bless Joseph? Why is he blessing Potiphar? Why doesn't he bless Joseph here now? But now then, things begin to take a real negative turn for Joseph. Because everything in Potiphar's house is put under his charge except for his wife. And Potiphar's wife comes to Joseph, and understand this is not an attempt at seduction. He is her property. And if he refuses, she can have him punished. But if he obeys, Potiphar can have him punished. How's this going to turn out right for Joseph? It doesn't get any better. Do you ever feel that way? Nobody's looking for Joseph, nobody's looking out for Joseph, and nobody's looking out for me. It just seems like every time this business about responsibility and I make the right choice every time, what good does it do to make the right choice if in the end I'm going to be punished for it? Why? But Joseph says, I can't do that. What does Miss Potiphar do? Miss Potiphar then now is shamed because Joseph has spurned her. And she tells Potiphar, this young man tried to rape me. And Potiphar takes him and has him put in prison. Luck is not with Joseph. Propriety is not with Joseph. Fairness is not with Joseph. But God is with Joseph. And here is a good man that God is allowing to suffer because he avoided what he avoided, because he responded and did not do wrong. You see, that will to choose can enable us to respond to make a wrong right, or it can make a wrong worse. And here it made a wrong worse for Joseph. So now, Joseph is in prison. And as he's imprisoned, again, for wrong he didn't commit, for wrong he did not commit because of a wrong he chose not to do. Here is Joseph now in prison. And as he's in prison, time goes by. He is now promoted to be head trustee of the prison, just as he was promoted to be head of Potiphar's house. And again, things at first don't seem to go well for Joseph, but then things take a turn. Because one day, Pharaoh is upset with two of his servants, his butler and his baker. And Joseph is serving them breakfast one day. And he sees they're a little bit down, they're a little bit downcast, a little disconsolate, and he says, "What's wrong with you boys?" They said, "We had a dream last night, and we don't know what the dream means." He said, "Well, why don't you tell me the dream?" And so they tell the dream. And as they tell the dream, the butler begins to tell his dream, and Joseph said, "Well, what this means is, in 3 days, you are going to be restored to your place with Pharaoh." Look at chapter 39 and look at verses 14 and 15, or verse 20. "Then Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and who was there in prison, and the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy." That word mercy, maybe your translation says loving kindness. That word is a covenant word for loving kindness. And what that means is that Joseph views himself at this time in covenant relationship with God. How is it that a man in covenant relationship with God, if this is his good God and God is with him, can allow him to be in prison because of a wrong he did not commit? And so he's in prison, and the butler tells him his story. And in verse 14 of chapter 40, he says, "But remember me when it is well with you, and please show me kindness, and make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews. Also that I've done nothing here, and they should put me in this dungeon." Do you get the tense? Do you get the tenor of what Joseph is saying here? I'm here and I don't deserve to be here. I'm responding as though God were with me, but I am frustrated by this. I am tired of this. I'm so disappointed about this. So will you please show me kindness? That is more kindness than perhaps my God has shown me. I thought I was in covenant relationship with God, and I've responded as though God were with me. Will you show me more kindness than my God has shown me? Will you remember me? And so he tells the baker his dream. And he says to the baker, "In 3 days, you'll not be restored to your place. In 3 days, your head will be required of you." A little time passes. Over 2 years now have passed. And Pharaoh has a birthday party. And he throws a big birthday party. And as Pharaoh throws his birthday party, he begins to tell about a dream that he had. And nobody can tell him what the dream means. And finally, the light bulb goes on. And the butler says, "You know, a few years ago, about 2 years ago, when you were upset with me and the baker, and you put us in prison, there was a guy there who told me what my dream meant, and by the way, it came true. And by the way, he told the baker what his dream meant, and by the way, it came true. I think he's still there." And they go get Joseph, and he cleans up. He probably is cleaner and smells cleaner than he's smelled in a long time. He comes before Pharaoh, and the butler has told him, "This man can tell you your dream." He comes before Pharaoh, and he says, "Well, I can't do it." Can you just see the butler over here squirming just a little bit? Wait a minute, time out. Don't tell him that. Don't tell him that. I can't do it, but my God can do it. Oh, now then you've really done it. because Pharaoh views himself as a god. And he loves the Egyptian gods, and he views the Egyptian gods as more powerful than his God. And not only does Joseph tell him the dream, but listen, here's what your dream means. You're going to have 7 years of plenty, and then you're going to have 7 years of famine, and it's going to be a famine all over the world, all over the land. There's not going to be hide nor hair of soil left for anything to produce anything here. You're going to have a famine that the world has never seen before. And what you need to do then is you need to appoint somebody in that 7 years of plenty to gather the 7 years of plenty to provide for the 7 years of famine. And the brother's over here thinking, wait a minute, you're overdoing it here just a little bit. You're telling him what he ought to do? This is Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world with the most powerful nation. And you're telling him what to do? And Pharaoh says, okay, you're it. I'm going to appoint you over this. And Jacob gathers in the 7 years of plenty. He builds storehouses. He buys the grain from every nook and cranny, from every corner he can buy. And he fills those storehouses of grain, and finally the 7 years of plenty are over. And the 7 years of famine come. Now keep in mind, Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery. At this time, he's about 40. In chapter 42, look with me how this reads. In chapter 42, begin in verse 3. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall me. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land of Israel, and it's he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him and their faces. And Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, and he acted as though he were a stranger to them and spoke roughly. Here he reacted. He did not use his responsibility. But look at what happened here. Joseph is now the prime minister of Egypt, the second most powerful man in Egypt and the second most powerful nation in the world. And here come these Hebrews from afar, and they come asking, can we buy grain from you? When Joseph says this, everything from the past begins to well up in his mind. The day they sold him into slavery, the day they took him and put him in the pit, the day they sold him into slavery, the terror that he felt, that chapter 44 talks about when the brothers are in prison and they recount, the terror that he felt when the slave traders are taking him off, how it felt to be in Potiphar's house and how it felt to be accused of something that he had not done. Here's Jacob, Joseph's son, kidnapped, sold in slavery, kidnapped, now in prison and framed. And all of that comes back to him. And now he begins to play with them. And say, is your father alive? And then they spill the beans. It's not only our father alive, but we have a young brother that's alive too. Well, he sends them away, and one of the brothers stays, kind of as a guarantee the brothers will come back. He's held hostage. And time passes. Time passes. The brothers come back, and Joseph can't stand it anymore. And he falls down before his 11 brothers in chapter 45. And this is what he says. Verse 3, then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Does my father still live? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me here to preserve life. Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. Can you just see them standing there with their mouths wide open? When they sold their brother, they went back and acted like he'd been killed by a wild animal and told their daddy a lie. And now they are standing before him, bowing before him. And they are terrified. But they don't need to be terrified. Because how would you respond in a circumstance like this if you were confident God was with you? Jacob dies, and they bury their father. And now the brothers think, now he's going to get even. We stripped him. We put him in a pit. He was sold in slavery. He was imprisoned unjustly because he was framed. But who's the hero? God. God was with him. And what did God do when this young man exercised his power to choose? That was a result of a measured responsibility. He used him to save the nation. Nobody fully understands God's plan. But would we have ever thought God's plan that would eventually come to produce the Messiah would come from 12 brothers, 10 of which had treated their younger brother with such cruelty? And then this younger brother, who responded all along in the circumstances he was in, responded as though God were with him. And he says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Why? That he might save many. God's promise to Abraham is now being fulfilled because of the responsibility, the power of a determined and reasoned response, not reaction. How would you respond? Not how would you react. The brothers expected him to react, but he responded, God is with me. That response set in course the future that changed the world. Never underestimate the power of a measured response, a response that is a result of reason and determination. How would we respond if we were confident God were with us, if we were in those circumstances? How would others respond? Not react. How would they respond? And then if people saw us respond as they saw Joseph respond, would we be that example to them that this is how they can respond if they are confident God is with them? These are our times, folks, but they're just a chapter. They're not the story. Our history as God's people, our history as a nation is rich with chapters. But the story is this: how would we respond in a time of pandemic if we were confident God were with us? How are those who have no confidence God is with them reacting? Are we going to be better for it or bitter for it? Are we going to be stronger for it or are we going to be defeated because of it? response, our measured response, if we're confident God is with us, sets in course our story. Because in this time of our chapter, we responded as though God were with us. I'm going to step out on a limb here. And I know I'm on the limb by myself. But I hope those who are streaming us listen to this, because I want you to hear it and I want them to hear it. Qualification. If you are high risk, then you protect yourself. But if you are low risk and you are going about your everyday life, every day, going to work, going to the grocery store, going shopping, as though life were usual, then how would you respond if you were confident God were with you in a time of pandemic? Isn't it time, folks, that we begin to respond as though God were with us? My appeal to you is, get out of your house, get out of your apartment, come assemble with us at 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock. We need you, and you need to be here. And if you're young and you're healthy, and you are at low risk, then respond in the time of circumstances we have as though God were with you. It's time that we began to live with COVID-19 as though God were with us. At any time, Joseph could have made a different response. But the response he led to the Messiah. Don't let this chapter in your life, because of these circumstances, keep you in a grip of fear because you are afraid to come to an assembly like this. I beg you, please come. Please be here with this group of people. We have the room. We're not busting the building. And if you're young enough, respond in these times of circumstances as though God were with you. It is your respondability and your power of a measured response that will set your future in course. And let's let it be, when this is over, that we are better, not bitter, that we are stronger, and that we're not defeated. Second, my king was not elected on the 3rd. My king is still the king. And nobody's deposed him. There's not going to be a recount. There's not going to be lawyers lobbying for a recount. And he's not going to have a party outside with a bunch of cars in front of him. He's still the king. He still rules. So, if it's not your vote, if it is your vote, then how will we do in this time, in this circumstance, as if God were with us? Guess what? The sun came up this morning. And guess what? We assembled this morning. Will we respond with a faith that God is with us in these time of circumstances? It's time that God's people react in these time of circumstances as though God were with them, and quit letting society tell us who's important and who rules. It's God who rules. We are God's people, and only Satan can divide us. Only Satan can defeat us. Only Satan can make us feel like our faith is insufficient, so that we'll react, not respond in a time as though God were with us in these circumstances. These are our circumstances. We didn't ask for them, but they're here. Joseph didn't ask for it either. But he responded as though God were with him every step of the way. Folks, how would you respond in your circumstances if you were confident God were with you? It is that responsibility and that choice that will make us better and stronger, not bitter and defeated. I love you. That's why I'm saying this. I'm not mad at anybody. I'm not upset at anybody. I'm fervent. I'm passionate about it. If you want me milk toast, I'll be milk toast. I'm passionate about it, folks. I love you. That's why I'm saying it. That's why I'm saying this to you folks. That's why I'm saying this to you. I love you. I know you. I know you are a people who live as though God were with you. And I beg you, let's live as though God were with us. Joseph, Jacob's son, kidnapped, sold into slavery, imprisoned and framed, made responses all along the way that by themselves appeared to have no significance. But at the end of the story, each one of those chapters were part of the story of God saving many through the response of one man. You see, our measured responsibility is at the core of who we are. Then let's be who we are. I love you. If you need salvation this morning, that one man that's at the core had a measured response. He allowed them to take him. He did not resist, and they put him on a cross so that we could believe in him and be washed of our sins in the waters of baptism. If that's your need, then we want to help you. If your need is other, then we want to encourage you while we stand and while we sing.